It began with a letter, one that slipped through the cracks of the White House mailroom, past the usual flood of fan mail, complaints, and political pleas. This wasn't from a senator, a general, or some big-shot lobbyist. No, this came from a 28-year-old Navy captain named Emma Caldwell, a name no one in Washington had ever heard of until now. Her words were cryptic, almost haunting. "Mr. President, I need to speak for those who can't. Time's running out." The staff laughed it off at first. Another dreamer, another nobody. But when Donald Trump got his hands on it, something shifted. His advisors scrambled, digging into her past, a rising star with a flawless record stained by one deadly mistake. Why her? Why now? Trump smirked, tossing the letter on his desk. "Let's see what this kid's got," he said. And that's when the storm began. The White House mailroom rarely saw anything worth a second glance, just the usual flood of letters from citizens, politicians, and crackpots. But on March 7, 2025, a plain envelope slipped through, bearing a typed note from Emma Caldwell, a 28-year-old Navy captain. It was short and cryptic. "Mr. President, I need to speak for those who can't. Time's running out." No details, no demands, just that. The staffers scoffed, pegging it as a prank. But it didn't stay buried. By noon, it reached a senior aide who ran her name through the system. Her file popped up. Top of her Naval Academy class, captain at 26, one of the youngest ever, decorated for flawless ops. But there was a catch. A mission 3 years ago where her call left teammates dead, including her best friend. The aide's stomach dropped. This wasn't a joke. This was a live wire. Word hit Donald Trump by afternoon. He was mid-briefing when the aide handed him the letter. "Speak for those who can't," Trump muttered, eyes narrowing. "Who's this kid think she is?" He demanded answers. The team scrambled, pulling her record, a prodigy with a perfect streak, marred by that one fatal choice. Controversy clung to her name. Some said she was scapegoated, others called her reckless. Trump's curiosity spiked. He'd met generals and admirals, but a 28-year-old captain bold enough to write him directly? That was new. "What's her angle?" he pressed. The aide hesitated. "Sir, we think she could be a plant. Maybe the opposition, maybe the military trying to stir trouble." Trump smirked. "A plant? If she's here to mess with me, I'll crush her before she blinks." Doubt gnawed at him, though. Her file screamed talent, but that black mark, the deaths, hinted at something deeper. What was so urgent she'd risk her career to reach him? His team pushed back, warning of a setup. "She's too young, too green, could be a Trojan horse," one said. Trump waved it off. "Young or not, she's got guts. Let's see if she's stupid enough to waste my time." He leaned forward, voice hard. "Set it up. If she's playing games, I'll make her regret it. If she's got something real, I want to hear it." The decision landed like a gavel. The staff exchanged uneasy glances. Emma Caldwell was a wild card, and Trump was rolling the dice. Her letter had no meat, just a hook, but it was enough to drag her into his orbit. Whatever she wanted, it was big and dangerous. Emma Caldwell stepped into the White House on March 8, 2025. Her navy blues crisp, her jaw set. The air was thick with unspoken stakes. Reporters hovered outside, sniffing for a story, while aides whispered about the young captain who'd somehow snagged a meeting with the president. She'd barely crossed the threshold when Donald Trump's voice cut through, dripping with mockery. "A 28-year-old captain, huh? I've had guys twice your age shaking in their boots just standing where you are." He lounged behind the resolute desk, arms crossed, sizing her up like a boxer eyeing an underdog. Emma didn't flinch. She met his stare, her voice steady as steel. "I didn't come here to shake, sir." Trump's smirk faltered for a split second, long enough to show he wasn't used to that kind of pushback. The room went quiet, aides shifting uncomfortably as the two locked horns. Trump leaned forward, testing her. "You wrote me that little note? Speak for those who can't. Cute. What's this about? You here to cry about something?" Emma squared her shoulders. "I'm here because the military's burying its failures, and I'm tired of watching good people pay for it." Her words landed like a punch. Trump's eyes narrowed, his tone hardening. "Burying failures? Listen, kid, I've made the military stronger than ever, best in the world. You're saying I'm wrong?" Emma didn't back down. "I'm saying the truth gets swept under the rug while you take the credit. Medals don't mean much when they're pinned on lies." Trump's face tightened, but Emma pressed on, her voice low and fierce. 3 years ago, I gave an order. Routine op should have been clean. But it wasn't. My best friend Jake Carter trusted me. He died because of it. The report blamed me, but the brass knew more than they let on. They hid it, protected their own asses, while I carried the weight. She paused, her gaze boring into him. You talk about leadership, Mr. President. Ever really known what sacrifice feels like? The accusation hung there, raw and jagged. Trump slammed a hand on the desk, the sound cracking through the room. You think you can waltz in here and lecture me? I've got millions riding on every call I make. People love me, people hate me, but I don't lose sleep over it. You're out of your depth, Captain. Emma didn't budge. Maybe. But I've seen men die because of decisions I made. Have you? Or do you just sign papers and call it a day? Trump's nostrils flared. He wasn't used to being challenged, not like this. Watch yourself, he snapped. You're accusing me of something and I don't take kindly to that. You want to tear me down? I'll end your career before you can blink. His threat was a blade, sharp and cold, but Emma held her ground. I'm not here to tear you down. I'm here because someone has to say it. The system's rotten and the people at the top don't care who gets crushed. Trump stood, towering over the desk, his voice rising. You think I don't care? I've built an empire, here and out there. Nobody does it better. You're a speck, Caldwell, a nobody with a grudge. Give me one reason I shouldn't have you hauled out right now. Emma's eyes flashed. Because I've got proof, documents the Navy buried. Jake's death wasn't just on me, and I can show you who's really to blame. You want the truth, or you just want your perfect image? Trump froze, his anger flickering into something else. Calculation. He sat back down, slow, deliberate. Proof, huh? You better not be bluffing, kid. If you are, you're done. Emma nodded, her pulse hammering. I'm not. But if I show you, you don't get to look away. The room crackled with tension, two wills clashing, neither ready to yield. This wasn't just a meeting anymore. It was war. The air in the Oval Office grew heavier as Emma Caldwell reached into her jacket, pulling out a thin, weathered folder. She slapped it onto the resolute desk, her eyes locked on Donald Trump. This, she said, voice cutting through the silence, is what they didn't want you to see. Trump's brow furrowed, but he didn't move, his hands resting on the armrests of his chair. 3 years ago, Jake Carter died under my command, Emma continued, but it wasn't just my call. My superiors screwed up, misread intel, ignored warnings, and when it went south, they pinned it on me. This report proves it. They buried it, forced me to take the fall and let the truth rot. She tapped the folder hard. It's all here. Names, dates, orders. The Navy's been lying to you, to everyone. Trump snorted, leaning back with a dismissive wave. Fake news. You think I haven't seen this game before? Some nobody walks in with a stack of papers crying about a cover-up. I've heard it all, kid, but his tone wavered, betraying a flicker of doubt. Emma didn't blink. Read it, she challenged, sliding the folder closer. Unless you're scared of what's inside. That jab hit its mark. Trump's jaw tightened, and with a glare he snatched the folder, flipping it open. His eyes scanned the pages, memos stamped classified, handwritten notes, a timeline of the botched op. The deeper he read, the paler he got, his fingers gripping the paper until it crinkled. This is real? He muttered almost to himself. Emma nodded, real enough to shake the Pentagon to its core. The room erupted. Trump slammed the folder shut and shot to his feet, his voice booming. You think you can drop this bomb and walk away? You want me to lose everything? My reputation, my legacy, for some dead guy? His face was red, veins bulging. I've got the best military in the world, and you're telling me it's a house of cards? Emma stood her ground, unflinching. I don't care about your legacy, sir. I care about the ones still breathing, the soldiers stuck in a system that chews them up and spits them out. Jake's gone, but there are thousands like him out there, and they deserve better. You can fix it. Or you can keep pretending. Trump's fists clenched, his anger morphing into something sharper, panic. Fix it? You're asking me to torch my own administration? If this gets out, the press will have a field day. Congress, the brass, they'll all come for my head. He pointed a trembling finger at her. You've got no idea what you're starting. Emma stepped closer, her voice low and fierce. I'm not asking, Mr. President. I'm telling you, do something or I will. These papers don't stay quiet unless I say so. Trump's eyes widened, a mix of rage and disbelief. You're threatening me? In my own office? I'll have those taken and you locked up before you hit the door." Emma didn't flinch. "Try it. I've got copies, safe, out of reach. You touch me and they hit every news desk from here to LA by morning. You think the public loves you now? Wait till they see this." The standoff stretched, taut as a wire. Trump's breathing grew ragged, his mind racing through the fallout. Headlines, hearings, his perfect image crumbling. He sank back into his chair, glaring at her. "You're playing a dangerous game, Caldwell. What do you want? Justice? Revenge?" Emma shook her head. "Neither. I want the truth out there, for Jake, for all of them. You decide what happens next, but you don't get to bury this again." Trump stared at the folder, then at her, his silence louder than any shout. The game had changed, and neither knew who'd blink first. The Oval Office showdown left a mark neither Donald Trump nor Emma Caldwell could shake. After Emma stormed out, folders still in her possession, Trump spent the night pacing the residence, the damning report burning a hole in his mind. He could bury it, seize her copies, discredit her, make her disappear. But the risk gnawed at him. If she wasn't bluffing, if those papers leaked, his presidency could unravel. By dawn he'd made up his mind, not out of nobility but survival. He called her back, his voice gruff over the line. "Caldwell, get your ass back here, today." Emma arrived at noon on March 9, 2025, wary but resolute, expecting a fight. Instead, Trump leaned against his desk, arms crossed, and dropped a bombshell. "You want to spill your truth? Fine. I'm giving you the podium, national stage, live broadcast. Tell the country whatever you want. But if you screw this up, if they turn on you, don't come crying to me. I won't lift a finger." Emma stared, caught off guard. This wasn't surrender. It was a dare, a calculated move to shift the heat onto her. "You're serious?" she asked, voice steady but laced with suspicion. Trump smirked, a glint in his eye. "Dead serious, kid. You've got your shot. Don't choke." She nodded, accepting the gamble, though her gut churned. This was no small stage. It was the White House press room, cameras rolling, millions watching. One misstep and she'd be a pariah, or worse. As she left to prepare, the news broke like wildfire. Reporters swarmed, headlines screaming speculation. Navy captain to expose military scandal? Trump's secret weapon or secret foe? Theories ranged from a political stunt to a full-blown Pentagon takedown. The internet exploded and Emma's name trended nationwide. Back at her hotel, Emma sat alone, drafting her speech on a battered laptop. Each word felt like a razor. Sharp enough to cut through lies, but dangerous enough to wound her too. She'd wanted justice for Jake, for the silenced, but now the stakes were sky high. Was she ready to drag the Navy, her home, her family, through the mud? Doubt crept in, cold and heavy. She pictured Jake's grin, his last words. "Don't let them break you." She typed faster, fueled by memory, but the weight of betrayal lingered. Could she honor him without torching everything she'd sworn to protect? Her phone buzzed, shattering her focus. A call from Lieutenant Mark Reyes, an old shipmate. His voice trembled. "Emma, what the hell are you doing? I heard about the speech. You've got to stop." She gripped the phone, knuckles white. "Mark, I can't. They buried Jake's truth, our truth. Someone's got to say it." He cut her off, desperate. "You'll make us all targets. The brass won't forgive this. They'll hunt us down, ruin us. You're not just screwing yourself, you're dragging every grunt who trusted you into this mess." His plea hit hard, a knife twisting in her chest. She'd fought alongside these men and women, bled with them. Was she turning on them now? "I'm not the enemy," she snapped, voice cracking. "The system is. If we don't fix it, more die." Mark sighed, defeated. "You're betting our lives on this, Em. I hope you're right." The line went dead. Emma stared at the screen, her resolve fraying but holding. Trump had handed her a megaphone, but it came with a noose. She'd speak, for Jake, for the living, but the cost was piling up. Tomorrow, she'd face the nation and there'd be no turning back. On March 10, 2025, Emma Caldwell stepped onto the White House press room podium. Her Navy uniform pristine, her hands steady despite the storm raging inside. The room was packed, camera lenses glinted, reporters scribbled, and a live feed beamed her face to millions across the country. She adjusted the mic, took a breath, and began. "3 years ago, I led a mission that should have been routine. It wasn't. My best friend Jake Carter died because of a call I made, or so I thought. Her voice was firm, cutting through the hush. But I wasn't alone in that failure. I found a report, buried by the Navy, proving my superiors botched the intel and let me take the blame. Jake trusted me, and they let him die to save their skins. She pulled the folder from her jacket, holding it up. This is the truth they hid. The room stayed silent as she laid out the details, dates, names, orders, all damning. Her words grew sharper. I'm not here to tear down the military I love. I'm here because it's broken, because good people suffer while the top brass dodge accountability. Leadership isn't about covering up. It's about facing the mess, owning it, fixing it. She paused, eyes scanning the crowd. Jake's gone, but there are thousands still serving, still bleeding. We owe them more. She stepped back, the folders still in hand, and the silence shattered. Questions erupted. Captain, are you accusing the Pentagon of a conspiracy? Is this a political hit? But Emma walked off, leaving her words to detonate. Behind her, Donald Trump stood in the shadows, arms crossed, his face a mask of ice. He didn't speak, didn't react, just watched as the nation split apart. Within hours, the fallout hit like a tidal wave. Social media ignited. Emma Caldwell trended with half the posts hailing her as a hero. Finally, someone's calling out the liars and the other half branding her a traitor. She's a disgrace to the uniform. Trump's base rallied hard. Talk shows screaming she was a wrecking ball sent to smear his legacy. This is a setup by the left, one pundit roared. She's their puppet. Meanwhile, his critics cheered. Op-eds praising her as the conscience America needs. The divide was brutal, unrelenting, and loud. Emma watched it unfold from her hotel, the TV flickering with split-screen debates. She'd expected pushback, but not this. A country tearing itself in two over her words. Trump's silence gnawed at her. Was he biding his time or cutting her loose? Her phone buzzed nonstop, texts from old Navy buddies, some supportive, others furious. You just torched us all. Then, late that night, an email pinged, no sender, just a subject line, "You'll pay." She opened it, heart sinking. You think you're safe, Caldwell? You've crossed the wrong people. This ends with your blood. It was signed, The Silent Watch. A veiled nod to senior officers she'd exposed. Her pulse raced. She'd known the brass would hit back, but this wasn't a reprimand, it was a death threat. She forwarded it to a friend at Naval Intelligence, but doubt crept in. Could she trust anyone now? The next morning, protests flared outside the White House. Veterans with signs reading "Justice for Jake," clashing with pro-Trump hardliners shouting "Lock her up." Cable news looped her speech, dissecting every word, while lawmakers demanded investigations. Some into the Navy, others into her. Trump finally broke his silence with a tweet. Captain Caldwell spoke her mind. Free country, let's see what happens. It was vague, maddeningly neutral, and only fanned the flames. Emma stared at the chaos she'd unleashed, the threat still echoing in her head. She'd wanted truth, not war, but war had found her, and it was just beginning. 3 weeks after Emma Caldwell's speech on March 31, 2025, Donald Trump stepped into the White House briefing room, his expression smug. The nation watched as he held up a single sheet of paper, Emma's report, and tore it in half. This so-called evidence, he declared, voice booming, a fantasy from a paranoid kid who couldn't hack it. I'm protecting our military's honor. Best in the world, folks, believe me. He announced her immediate discharge from the Navy, effective that day. She's out. Done. We don't need liars in uniform. The room cheered, his supporters roaring approval, while Emma, watching from her hotel, felt the floor drop out. Trump had flipped the script, painting her as unhinged, and the public bought it. Overnight, she became a ghost. Family stopped calling, friends ghosted her, and the press, once hungry for her story, pivoted to disgraced captain headlines. Emma was alone, her career ashes, her name poison. She packed her few belongings, avoiding mirrors. She couldn't face the stranger staring back. The threats from the silent watch had stopped, replaced by an eerie silence that felt worse. She'd lost everything, her rank, her purpose, Jake's justice. Trump had won, his image untarnished, the Navy's secrets safe again. Or so it seemed. Late that night, her phone pinged, an encrypted message from an unknown number. "We've got your back, Caldwell, check the link." Heart-pounding, she clicked it. A dark web forum, buzzing with chatter from a group calling themselves the Forgotten. They were veterans, grunts, not brass, claiming they'd snagged her report before Trump torched it. Lawsuits filed, the message read, Pentagon sweating. You lit the match, we're the fire. Emma reread it, stunned. These weren't her allies from the speech. They were shadows, faceless ex-soldiers, who'd seen the same rot she had. The suit named names she'd exposed, demanding audits, resignations, justice. It wasn't a win, not yet, but it was a pulse, a flicker of hope she hadn't dared imagine. Trump might have crushed her in the spotlight, but in the dark, her words were spreading, festering, threatening the machine she'd dared to defy. She didn't know their plan, didn't know if they'd succeed, but it was enough to pull her from the edge. She grabbed her coat and drove, the night swallowing her tracks. By dawn, she stood at Arlington National Cemetery, the air sharp and cold. Jake Carter's headstone gleamed under faint light, simple and unyielding. She knelt, tracing his name with trembling fingers. "I failed you," she whispered, voice breaking. "Trump won. They shut me up. But these guys, they're fighting with what I gave them. They won't fail." A gust whipped through, chilling her to the bone, rustling the grass like a reply. She stood, tears streaking her face, and saluted. One last time. Was it Jake, the wind, or her own stubborn hope? She couldn't tell. She turned away, boots crunching gravel, leaving the past behind but carrying it still. Trump basked in his victory, the public eating up his narrative. Emma a footnote, a cautionary tale, yet beneath the surface the veteran's lawsuits simmered, filings piling up, whispers growing louder. Emma vanished from the headlines, a nobody again, but her spark hadn't died. It smoldered, unseen, uncertain. Would it fizzle out, crushed by bureaucracy, or blaze into something bigger? No one knew. Not Trump, not the Pentagon, not even her. The ending hung open, a question mark etched in silence as the wind kept blowing through Arlington, carrying secrets no one could bury forever. Emma Caldwell's journey teaches us a brutal truth. Courage doesn't guarantee victory, but silence guarantees defeat. She risked everything, career, safety, sanity, to unearth a buried wrong, only to face betrayal and isolation. Yet her spark ignited a fight she never saw coming, proving that one voice, even crushed, can ripple into change. In life, we'll face systems too big to topple, leaders too powerful to sway, but speaking up, however messy, plants seeds for others to water. It's not about winning, it's about refusing to let lies fester. So ask yourself, what truth are you dodging? Stand for it, even if you stumble. Thanks for sticking with this story. Your thoughts keep it alive. Drop a comment. What would you have done in Emma's shoes? Like, share, subscribe. Let's keep the conversation going. See you next time.